Good morning. My name is Jim Creamer, and you're listening to Mortgage Savvy Radio, the show that keeps you informed and helps you make better decisions when it comes to purchasing or financing your home. Thank you for listening today. We have a great weekend this weekend because it's my birthday, and because of that, Newport Beach is holding a party at Fashion Island. I like to call it Jim's birthday party, but they call it the Taste of Newport. We also have a great guest on the show this week. His name is Christopher Clark. He's an artist, a musician, and a professional Lindy Hop dancer. I guess primarily he's an artist, but it's very interesting talking to Christopher because he's a multi-talented, creative individual. So we look forward to speaking with him a little bit later on in the program. Also, we have a beautiful feature property today. I actually walked through this property yesterday. It is really neat. They have an open house today from 1 until 4 p.m. So be sure to check out that property. If you want to go and look at information on the property right now, you can go to the Facebook page at facebook.com/Swift Loans. You can find information on the property with pictures, contact information for the realtor, etc. Remember, we love listener questions to answer here on the show. You can post your questions on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Swift Loans, or you can send an email to radio@jimcreamer.com. We'll read every question on the air, and if we read your question on the air next week, we'll send you something nice from one of the local businesses here in the Newport Mesa area. Sometimes we don't have listener questions. If we don't, what we do is we normally I'll go over scenarios or common issues that we may run into as we process loans here at Swift Loan Funding, and it might be something that you can relate to. Today, I think we're going to talk about the HARP 2.0 and the qualifications for that. It should be very interesting to some of you, I'm sure. Each week, we talk about the Freddie Mac survey of lenders. They come out with this every Thursday. We use this as a comparative basis when we speak about the Swift Loan Funding rates later on in the segment. This week, the Freddie Mac survey says that the average 30-year fixed rate was 3.55%. That's the same as last week. And the 15-year fixed rate down just slightly to 2.85% from 2.86% the week before. So that's Freddie Mac's survey of lenders. Now, for both loans, that's with 0.6 percentage points in lender fees. Last week, at the end of the week, I alluded to locking your loan before Wednesday because there's a lot of activity that was happening this week in terms of the FOMC announcement and meeting with Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke, also the German parliamentary court ruling over the constitutionality of their participation in the ESM to try to stabilize the economy over there, because Germany's actually got a pretty strong economy, so they don't necessarily need to participate in this, but they've decided they're doing it under certain conditions. That was news that came out on Wednesday that actually helped interest rates a little bit. The rates have been volatile this week. Rates were worse on Monday and Tuesday, having to do probably with lenders anticipating rates getting worse from the announcement from Germany on Wednesday. I think they knew what was basically going to be announced by Germany. They had a feeling for that anyway. And then that made rates a little bit worse than last week. But then what happened on Thursday was that Bernanke said that they were going to fund the purchase of mortgage-backed securities at the rate of $40 billion per month. Amazing. So the bond prices that drive rates went to all-time lows on Thursday. And then today they rebounded back just a little bit. During these times of wild swings in the market, we try to lock, but we don't chase locks. We look for some stability in the trading patterns of the bond prices so that we can lock loans within these trading ranges and come up with the optimal pricing for locks for our customers. But it's interesting that all that news has happened. The timing of the news is very interesting to me. The timing of this announcement by Bernanke is actually interesting in that it coincides with an increased guarantee fee that lenders are required to pay to both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the GSEs, as they call them, the government-sponsored entities. So what I'm saying is that the GSEs have charged, and it was effective this week actually, have charged the lenders more money to deliver loans back to them. And as a result, that pricing's passed on to the customer. The rates end up getting higher. And that took effect at the beginning of this week. Some lenders had already priced that in, and so it hasn't been as big of an impact to people. But a lot of lenders made that effective this week. The interesting part about that is that it comes right ahead of the announcement by Bernanke that rates are going to stay low going into 2015, which has absorbed a lot of that impact. So the GSEs are making more money from the lenders as a result of the increased refinances, and the government is keeping the rates low to basically to stimulate the economy. But in addition to that, what's happening in the background is that these GSEs get the benefit of the lower rates. Their increased fees to the lenders who are delivering them these loans get absorbed by the lower interest rates as a result of the government policy to keep rates low. Interesting. The other thing that I want to talk about is HARP 2.0. You may have heard of HARP 2.0. HARP 2.0 was designed to save those people who are basically underwater on their mortgage. However, because of some of the rules that are associated with HARP 2.0, pretty much everybody that has a loan that was dated prior to the end of May 2009 can benefit from these loans. So here are basically the rules. Firstly, HARP 2.0 is available to owner-occupied properties, investment properties, and second homes. Those properties need to have had loans that were either delivered to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac prior to the end of May 2009. If you have a loan on your property, this is a 1 through 4, so 1 unit through a 4 unit, owner-occupied, investment property, or second home, if you have a loan on there that you've had since prior to the end of May 2009, you are potentially eligible for a refinance under HARP 2.0. The advantages of that are that if you lack the equity, you actually can get very, very competitive interest rates. You don't necessarily need to have an appraisal done. Fannie Mae doesn't require that an appraisal be done on their property if they have the statistics to support the value. Your debt-to-income ratios don't need to be in line with the common guidelines. The common guidelines say that the debt-to-income ratio needs to be under 45%. However, if you are doing a HARP loan, if you're eligible for a HARP refinance, we are refinancing people with 60% back-end ratios. So that means that 60% of their income is going towards their monthly expenses. That is outside of the guidelines. So there's a lot of flexibility for these HARP 2.0 loans. The other significant thing about these HARP loans is, the initial purpose for these things was to help refinance people who are underwater on their mortgage. Initially, they were doing 105% of the property's value. Then they increased it to 125% of the property's value, so you could be underwater by 25%. And then they increased it now with HARP 2.0 to no limitation on how far underwater you are with your property. However, we've talked about lender overlays in the past. Lenders are limiting the loan to value to 175% for borrowers that are well qualified. So you can be underwater by 75%, almost double what the loan is, and still qualify for a loan with a really good interest rate, competitive. We're doing, we'll talk about this in a second, but we're doing 30-year fixed rates for no closing costs at 3.375. You can get a loan that's really close to that interest rate on a HARP 2.0 loan. Speaking of interest rates are even better now, and I think, again, going into next week, when we start to see some stability with the markets, the interest rates may get even better. This week, we're still on top of our rate rankings with our 30-year fixed at 3.375 APR. That's with zero closing costs. And our 15-year fixed rate is 2.75% APR with no closing costs. You can actually go ahead and check these rates for yourself on our website at swiftloanfunding.com. We use our fast quote engine. That engine is tied directly to live lender rate sheets. So as those rates change throughout the day, those are reflected on our website in near real time as they get updated throughout the day. The fast quote engine at swiftloanfunding.com is accurate as to the fees and closing costs. Everything is already factored in. So what you see is what you get. What you see when you run on the fast quote is what you'll end up with on your good faith estimate. It's also what you end up with on your HUD closing statement when the loan finally closes. Our guest today is Christopher Clark. He's a local artist and a competitive Lindy Hop dancer. Just Lindy Hop?
Lindy Hop is one of the dances of swing dancing, yes.
Swing dancer. You're a competitive swing dancer.
Right.
And a local artist. Your passion is the art.
Right.
What kind of art do you do?
I do everything from portraits and landscapes and food and still lifes, and I have florals, and I have a lot of paintings that I have already painted that are for sale in my inventory. But then I also do commission paintings, which is when someone orders a custom painting for me, and a lot of times that happens like somebody will approach me. I'll give you one project I did for a friend recently. He approached me and said, my wife and I went on this vacation in Malibu a couple years ago with our two dogs, Maddie and Mr. Fluff. And Maddie passed away recently, and it was the most wonderful time, and it was the last time our two dogs were running on the beach together playing, and it was beautiful. Can you make me this painting of this image? So he gave me some reference photos of his two dogs and of the area where they stayed on the beach in Malibu. And basically, I put the scene together out of just his description of the experience. From just describing this memory to me, I put this painting together. And when I gave it to him, he was completely flabbergasted. His wife cried when she saw it. That's the scenario that happens a lot. Rarely do I ever get someone who says, here's a photograph, can you just recreate this as a painting? That hardly ever happens.
So mostly people are asking you to recreate memories then when they're
That's
asking
right.
you for these commissioned paintings.
Right. And it's really, I think it's a fun project because I'll sit down with them and have a conversation. It's a very one-on-one experience. They'll tell me about this experience they had, and maybe they have some photos, and sometimes they don't. I have to try to find photos of the area or things and try to put it together. But I just try to get as much information from them as possible. The slightest little details can make such a huge difference in the piece because they'll notice those details later. They said, oh my God, I can't believe you put this little detail in there. And that it's kind of like that show Cold Case. One of those old detective shows they have on TV when they say, oh, any little bit of information you can give us will help solve this case. And people give the most random little things. That's exactly the same thing with the painting. I'll listen for the smallest little details they'll say in passing that they really didn't think was that big of a deal. But I'll notice them and I'll put them in the painting, and they're floored the next time they see it that I included those things.
So of the different types of art that you do, it's all painting, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
The commissioned paintings, how long have you been doing that?
I don't know. I've been doing it probably as long as I've been painting. The first ones I did, I'd done wedding portraits for people. Friends of mine, I did a graphite charcoal portrait of them for a wedding. That was probably one of the first ones I did. People at the wedding were just falling all over themselves at this picture that was there when they came into the reception, and they all wanted to know who did it. And so that's sort of where I got started.
So it's that feedback that kind of fueled the fire to continue doing that.
Yeah. I did another piece for a friend of mine who got married about a year ago, and he sent me a photo of the wedding in action with all the party standing there and him and his wife at the altar, and he said, can you do this painting? And that's one of the rare occasions when they just give me the photo and say do it. But one of the liberties I get to do as an artist is I get to idealize the photo and make it better than it actually is. I add lighting and I remove details that aren't necessary, and I emphasize details that are important so that I can turn just a photograph into a